my first thought coming out of our AI task force meeting is really what one of you said. Instead of taking the time to create your own model, it would be good to create a team that curates prompts, that has an idea of prompts. That brought up what is a prompt? I mean, like, we know that like typing into ChatGPT or an LLM or something like that is a prompt, but you guys seem to think of them even more complex than that. Like, writing in what is the best law firm in LA? Like, yeah, that's a prompt, but why would I want to save that?
Well, I think the first, I'm going to start technical, and then we can get into the kind of end user flow for prompting. But, the models use any context that's given to them in order to generate the next token. And that's a complex way to say that you can guide the thinking of these systems by giving it extra words, right? You could have a conversation. That's one way to do it. A lot of people will just do a dialogue, and that's how they get the model to do what they want by message 5. But an alternative way to do it is feed it enough text to start off that it knows how to follow all of your future instructions because you've given it a framework that it always kicks off with. Every time it generates a new token, it's reading that message first. And that's sort of where the system message of instructions came from for a lot of these models and why they're so valuable.
What do you mean by...
sorry.
What do you mean by it's reading that first? Am I putting this prompt into somewhere where this specific LLM instance, I guess, kind of like, am I telling this specific LLM instance to think a certain way from the beginning?
That's typically how they'll treat the prompts, especially if it's your first message. That's the best place to put a prompt.
Okay.
And the reason is really that these computations are done by placing all of our messages into an array that's called attention. And attention is the way that we take all of the existing text that has been submitted, and we use it in order to guess what kinds of things we should produce. And I think the value of that is that we can set it up to, for instance, speak another language by speaking a language to it, right? That's how it learns in attention to produce another language.
Okay.
But I think the more interesting part is that I can use, let's say, more technical language, or I can ask it for a specific task, tell it how to work in a sequence. Any of that can happen at one point in the message system that will then cause the attention to pick that pathway and usually cause a lot higher accuracy rate for the generations that we get from the model.
Yeah, I was saying Ethan Mollick likes to say, treat it like a person and tell it what kind of person it is. So you can set that context in your prompts and give it those instructions ahead, so that it understands how to respond.
Well, so where am I doing that?
Simple example of that.
Where am I doing that though? In the, like, where am I putting these prompts? So again, I tend to do dialogue. I tend to say, hey, ChatGPT, and I tend to work in ChatGPT. Hey, ChatGPT, here's what I'm trying to do. Here's some information about it. Ask me any questions you need in order to get this task done. And I go back and forth. And 3 hours later, I've solved the world's problems. But I do it in like, there's no place in that where I think, ooh, I should save this as a prompt and like stick it away somewhere into a library. Where am I kind of creating or putting that in order for, I guess, is it for my future prompts to then be affected, or the answers to my future prompts to be affected by that?
I mean, is the question, what's the value of the library, or
no, it's like, where am I doing this? I think it's more basic than
that.
like where am I putting this prompt? Like, what? I've never run into a place necessarily where I think, oh, I'm going to save this. Like, where am I putting this prompt so it has this pre-information, I guess, for my future prompts?
I mean, it depends a little bit on the model you're using. Most models now have a personalization capability where you can tell it, here are some things you need to remember about me for the future. Certainly that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is that the AI remembers the context of your conversation. So you can start a conversation and you can always come back to that same conversation later. So, like, I know people who have, 3, 4, 10 simultaneous conversations going on with the AI, and they keep jumping back to the previous conversation and continuing it.
Yeah.
So they started the conversation weeks ago, right? But every couple of days they have some new thing they need to do in that flow, and so they'll jump back into that conversation and just pick up from there. The AI is, infinitely patient. It'll sit there and wait for you to continue. The challenge with that is there is a limited context window, so after a while it forgets what came at the beginning. So sometimes you have to remind it. Um, and also if you're changing topics subtly, it can be helpful to start a new conversation. That's a little bit more of a nuanced issue. But yeah, I mean, there's a few different ways you can do it. I like to put certain things that are universally true in my personalization, whether it's in ChatGPT or Copilot.
Mm-hmm.
You have those. You can in Copilot, it's called custom instructions, where you can basically tell it things like, keep your tone. You do voice and tone instructions. You can tell it, I prefer concise. I prefer bullet points, things like that. I prefer visualizations, or you can tell it the opposite. Never use bullet points. Um, so if you want that, and so um, the custom instructions are one way you can do it, and that's for things that are going to be more or less universally true. But also just you can continue the conversation. Once you've started a conversation with it, you don't have to, it's not time limited. It's not like talking to your friend where at some point you're going to say goodnight and go home, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
go ChatGPT is perfectly happy to continue the same conversation you had a week ago today, and it doesn't know.
So then that customization is something that I can save as is that what we're talking about when we're talking about like having a prompt library, having um prompt, the importance of prompt building, I guess.
I mean, I think the prompt library is a little bit more than that. I think for the prompt library, it's an example of you've figured out some prompt that did something great for you, and
Okay.
you want to remember that. Like, I want to use this again. Like, this prompt was great. I want to use it again someday, right? Or this prompt was great, and I want to share it with other people in my company, other people in my firm.
Okay.
And so that's where the value of the prompt library comes in, is that you don't want to have to try to remember, what did I do with that prompt 3 weeks ago? How did I word that? Um, and also, you don't want to have to type the whole thing in again, especially if it was a fairly long prompt. I mean, some of these prompts can be paragraphs and paragraphs long, and you don't have to retype that darn thing every time. And so the
Mm-hmm.
prompt library becomes a source where you can effectively copy paste and reuse that prompt, that brilliant prompt you came up with a month ago. You can reuse it anytime you need to, but also you can share it with other people in your firm so that they can use it. Um, and I think in a perfect world, you get in, and it's kind of the thing that we were talking about a little bit in the task force meeting. You get into a situation where somebody comes up with a prompt and it's really good. And so they
Mm-hmm.
choose to save it in the prompt library, the firm prompt library, where everybody can see it. And then somebody else takes that prompt and they make some small improvement to it, right? And then they update the one that's in the prompt library. And then over time, people working with it and improving it, and of course the models are getting better. And that prompt that started off really good becomes even better and better and better as different people take a pass at it, figure something out, improve it in some way. Um, and now it becomes a reusable resource within the firm that it becomes a bit of an advantage too, because your prompt library in your firm is unique to your firm, right? The guy across the street may have the same chat GPT you do, but he doesn't have your
Yeah.
prompt library. And so if you've invested some time and thought into building those prompts that do magical things for you and your firm, that becomes a competitive advantage for you and your firm.
So does that just live as like a copy paste thing? Like
It
in a
can. It depends on
in a
the form of it.
document?
Like in Copilot, there's a Copilot prompt gallery where you can save and share prompts. That's not so much a copy paste, because you can actually go there and click on the prompt and then it'll run it in Copilot for you. But you don't have to use Copilot prompt gallery. You can use OneNote. You can use Word. I mean, use anything where you can save text can be a prompt gallery. It just
Yeah.
depends on your workflow and what works best for you. I've seen it done in SharePoint pretty commonly, where somebody sets up a SharePoint list that's their prompt gallery. I've definitely seen it done in OneNote. I saw one firm that did it in Loop. But you could do it in just about anything, if as long as it's a
Okay.
place you can save and share text.
I feel like it might be nice to have version control in
Yeah,
there as well,
right. Somebody
because
makes a tweak to the prompt that actually wasn't better.
somebody
Yeah,
screws up
that can
my
happen for sure.
prompt, you know?
Yeah,
Mhm. Well,
The
that
future might be
and
to actually put that in a database. I'll let you get to that, Sam, in a sec. But right, being able to get them from a database would actually be probably the most ideal situation, because right now when it searches through Word, maybe you have like a vector-based retrieval, but being able to have like a hybrid retrieval of the different kind of prompts you want to use.
Mhm.
I'm sure that there's going to be more systems like that that make it easier and easier for the end user to click them, but also for the system to retrieve them as needed.
Yep.
yeah, and I think to me, measurement is important of this kind of thing because if you treat prompts like magic spells where you don't know what's going to happen, right? But record, did this do well? Like even something as simple as a scale of 1 to 5.
Mm.
Yeah.
Like this does okay, or this does really well when I've used it, and I use it over and over. And
Uh-huh.
keep track of what you're using it with, because different models behave differently. One
Yeah.
prompt and one set of tasks could do really well with Claude and fall on its face with Gemini. You don't know until you've tried that, until you're keeping track of it. So you
Right.
don't want to run into having a prompt library that people think isn't great because they're using they're using Copilot and not Claude.
So, okay, now I can see where the database aspect of this would come in, is that I want to have the actual text of the prompt. I want to have potentially what it's been used for. So we've tested it with Claude, we've tested it with ChatGPT. It's great with Claude. It didn't do really well with Anthropic or what have you. And being able to kind of iterate off of that instead of just having a Word document, but also being able to search like what's the what's the point of this one? Like being able to tag them, I guess, would be good as well.
Yeah. Yeah. A great prompt library will be able to, you'd be able to use some sort of categorization so that people can find what they're looking for, but also exactly what Drew and Sam were talking about, I think, which is that feedback loop too of where did it work well, where didn't it work well. Being able to have an actual discussion around the prompt is helpful to improving it and using it well.
So do y'all have your own kind of like personal prompt libraries then?
I do, yeah. I actually have two, which I'm occasionally think I should spend some time and reconcile, but I never seem to find the time to do it. But um, I use Copilot Prompt Gallery a little bit, partly because I have to demo it, so I practice, I use it and then
Yeah.
demo it. Um, but probably most of my best prompts I tend to put in OneNote. Um, but then I'm not in the situation where, at least currently, I'm not sharing them very much because they tend to be prompts just for my use cases.
Right.
But that may change pretty soon. I mean, it may be getting to the point soon where I need to start sharing them more. So I may have to rethink that.
So thinking about this from the perspective of a lawyer that's running their firm or somebody that's running the office, office manager or COO or something like that, um, at what point should they start thinking about like um, we need to make these community prompt libraries. We need to kind of bring in the disparate whatever form prompt libraries people have, because I think we're not, when we say prompt library, we're really talking about place that you store your prompts, not anything formal. When should a COO or an attorney or somebody like that, somebody running the firm, start pushing that, start thinking about that?
I would do it pretty early, honestly. I think one of the challenges that people have with AI, especially when they're talking about the productivity AIs like ChatGPT or Copilot, is that when you open it, you've got an empty box, right? I mean, there are some suggested prompts there which may or may
Right.
not be relevant to you, but there's an empty box, and a new user is looking at this box going, "What do I do now? Like, what do I type in here? What is this going to do?" Right? And
Mm-hmm.
I think having some sort of resource that's vetted and by their friends, by their colleagues, by people in their firm that says, "Hey, here's some prompts. It doesn't have to start off with 1,000 prompts. It's not going to anyway. But here's a handful of prompts that you might find useful to get started." Right? And they can look at it and go, "Yeah, no, not that one. Oh, yeah, that's kind of interesting. Let's see what that does." Right? And it just gets them in there. It gets them started. It gets them to
Yeah.
try a prompt or two, and then hopefully that inspires them to say, "Okay, I've typed a few things in here. It did some things. Some of them were good. Some of them weren't that good. Um, let's try some other things." Hopefully.
Yeah.
But I would start it early because I think the sooner the better will get people moving. Other than just here's a 1 hour CLE you're going to have to pay attention to, and here's an empty box to type in.
Yeah. I I wonder if people don't see the value of their own prompts though right now, in saying like, oh, I did a good job or I did a bad job or whatever, but see the value of even sharing. Because honestly, I've never had a prompt where I thought, man, I need to send this to Ben, Sam, and Drew. They would be, and you guys are kind of bad examples for that, but I've never really had a prompt where I'm like, other people would totally be able to use this.
Yeah, that's fair. Not everybody's going to feel comfortable sharing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so what then, speaking of sharing prompts, what if people are having trouble kind of thinking about like what a prompt that they might be able to get out to their company or other people would be, do y'all have examples of prompts that you think, hey, other people have been able to use this, or I've reused this over and over and might want to put this into a prompt library for other people?
I'm going to steal the stage really quick for this one. The prompt that makes prompts. I call it the mother of all prompts.
The MOP.
I think that's it's a fun way to get people started on things. I've shared it, here, and I've shared it at previous places, and it can also work, for your firm. It makes pretty high complexity prompts though, so you gotta choose what your use case is going to be for it. But I do think that, especially for people who have that, blank chat box problem, it's a great way to start. And similarly, that one's sort of an interview focused prompt, but any prompt that really just tells the model, like you were saying, Zach, ask me questions, figure out what my problem is, and let's go, find a way to solve it. I think those are the great, starter prompts that don't require us to have a certain role or a use case, but in this sense, we just have the LLM work with us to learn what it needs to do.
Honestly, you could use that as a prompt. It'd be interesting to see what it does, but it would do something interesting, I think, if you just used ask me questions, let's figure out what my problem is, and then let's figure out how to solve it. Like, make that your prompt and see what it does. And I guarantee you it would be interesting. Whether it would be effective or not, we'll see. But I mean, in some cases it might. But yeah, I have a meta prompt too, which is just what Drew was describing. It's a great tool, and I even talk about it in some of my presentations.
Oh man, I love these meta prompts.
Yeah. One of the other things you can do that I like in meta prompting is I hear from people all the time. I want the AI when it's writing, I want it to sound like me, right? How can I train it to sound like me? And people are like, oh well, just tell it the voice and tone you want it to have. And then people are like, well, what is my voice and tone? I don't know what my voice and tone is. How do I describe my voice and tone? Right? It's just me, like sound like me. And so one of the meta prompts that I sometimes teach people and share is show it an example of your writing or more than one example of your writing that you think is a good example, and tell it, how would you describe the voice and tone of this article, of this blog post, of this email, of whatever. And the AI will look at it and it'll come back and it'll tell you, it's clear but authoritative, it's whatever it is, right? Then you've got the keywords you can feed back to it in the future where you say, hey, write a thing about thing, keep your voice clear and authoritative, right? You can throw back at it the same descriptors it gave you about your writing. And so ask the AI, how would you describe my writing?
I like that. Sam, you got meta prompts that you like to throw out there?
I vacillate between like the having a discussion to build something, which I actually really enjoy that, and doing like the start out with a big concept and then refine it down, to like starting out with a more complex prompt. And when I do the more complex prompt, I think to me it needs to have like 5 areas is how I think of it. So like give it an identity and a role, like tell it what it is and what it's like you're doing this and this is your job, right? Be explicit on your instructions, because otherwise it's just going to assume what what it is you want. Like the narrower the focus, the better sometimes. So if I want it to say I'm an attorney reviewing purchase agreements, right? I want it to focus on the purchase agreement. I need to be narrow, and like tell it that. And then give it like an output format that I want. Do I want like a 5-paragraph essay? Do I want a memo? Do I want 5 bullet points, right? because otherwise it's again gonna assume. And then this one I borrowed from like a trial law concept, which is rules of the road. Like giving it the operating parameters to actually do its job. Like what are the rules of the road? You have to do this, and then you have to think about this, but you don't consider this thing. Like think about it that way. But yeah, to me it depends on the use case. Sometimes it's easier just to start that discussion thread and see where it goes, and then maybe try like work backwards from the end product that I think I want, and try and write a prompt that I think is going to get me what I want, and then refine it from there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, guys, I think that's all the time we've got for today. This is obviously way more information than I anticipated, and there's way more information out there. I appreciate you guys kind of walking us through prompts. Thanks for being with me. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Zach.
Thanks, everybody.